and I saw it in the news, and I got really excited because it was like something new. And during my undergrad, I actually I took some philosophy of mind classes and things like that, and so I've always been interested in artificial intelligence. So I started playing around with this stuff, and I realized that more than just a, I don't know, kind of a toy, it's actually something that can affect my workflow. And so when there was an opportunity to share the tools that we'll be talking about today, I definitely took a chance on it. And I think that the big thing about the presentation is there's a lot of, it can be overwhelming. We'll start with that. And so we're hoping to give you a few different entry points. So for those of you who've used a lot of these tools before, hopefully you'll learn a few more. And for those of you who've never used any of this at all, it'll be a good opportunity to try it for the first time. And so I think that's our ultimate goal here. And so I'm going to pass it off to Nick. And if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Nick Perry, and I work over at SUHSD in the English department. And I've been fiddling with AI since it kind of came on the scene, GPT, and then some of the more artistic generative AIs for side projects. And I enjoy tech anyway. So it was something that I've been playing with off and on, and then seeing how I could leverage it in the classroom. So over the course of the year, I've been using it for creating like small assignments, working with the kiddos on their papers, and kind of seeing what this can do in terms of workflow and general efficiency. Anywhere you can save some time or make things a little less difficult so you have more time for the kids is a good thing in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that if you look at like our LCAP goals for the district, one of them is dealing with teacher retention. And I've thought a lot about that as an instructional coach at the high school. I think about how are we going to not only entice people to come to the district, but how are we going to keep them here? And I think that figuring out ways to, streamline workflow, I think is one big barrier that happens earlier on inside of the, yeah, I know that too. Yeah, so earlier on inside of your career. And so, before you start getting those reps. And so I think that this has the potential to help with some of those things. It won't solve everything. And so I always like to think about it. It's not a replacement, it's an assistant. And that's the best way to think about this. And so it's almost like a free personal assistant, and it can do quite a few things if you're able to ask it the right questions. Now with that, let's get it going. And so right over here, so in the chat, I'd like you to just go ahead and put down, so do you have any experience with AI tools? So have you used, GPT? Are you a power user? Are there any tools that you can think of that you've used? If so, which ones have you used before? So go ahead and toss that in the chat. If it's a no, that's awesome too. And the no's make my life a lot easier.
No means you're going to have way more work than me.
Yeah. Oh, this is exciting.
This is really cool. You got scared, Emily? But you have Nate. That's funny.
And as a drive, I like that. All right, cool. So it looks like there's kind of varying levels. A few people have kind of delved in just a bit. Some people have maybe not yet. And so this is going to be a good opportunity to check it out today.
Yeah. And again, it's not so much taking all of it in. It's just picking up a few things here and there that you think are going to be useful for you in the classroom. And we try to do our best to provide all like the general terminology that you'd be hearing if you're paying attention to the AI sphere, but then also having enough tools that are not just like for ELA or for like one specific area, but it's cross-curricular. And that's the important piece.
Yeah, and so it's like, you don't have to take away everything, but if you're able to take away one thing, I think we've done a good job here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do right now is we're going to talk a little bit about the some AI terms, and you'll notice some interesting artwork throughout the presentation. And so we wanted to show off a few different things that like AI generated images can do. And so this is one that Nick created using a prompt, and we'll talk about what a prompt is. And then we'll talk about how to use those prompts to get different types of products. Now we're going to start off with the boring stuff, and so we're going to front load this first for all you nerds out there. And so, but I think it serves a good baseline. And so, if you are interested, I think this is kind of interesting stuff. And so we'll start off with just the term AI first. And so what is AI? So we know that it stands for artificial intelligence, but what does that actually mean? And so it's one thing for me to put in something into a Google search, and then it gives me a response. And that's kind of magic already. If you think about 100 years ago, that would have been magic, right? But AI is a little bit different. What it does is it's actually thinking and curating things in order to give you a proper response. And so we're going to start off first with the term predictive AI. Predictive AI is not what we're talking about here. And predictive AI is something that you're probably most familiar with. If you've picked up your phone before and you've done little like, hey Siri, blah, blah. I probably shouldn't say that too loud because it's going to send off people's whatever. But in that case, you're using predictive AI. If you've ever went on YouTube and then it's like, oh, you might also like this. Or if you went on Netflix and then it puts you down the Netflix rabbit hole and it just keeps sending you over and over to different shows. In that case, that's all predictive AI. So it uses your historical data to make predictions about what you might like next. Now, generative AI, and this is why this is kind of exciting, generative AI is a little bit different. What it's doing is it's actually creating brand new content. And so when I ask, when I go into YouTube, it's not creating a new video for me, but generative AI can. And so I think that's really the difference here. It uses a thing called a neural network. We're not going to get into it, but there's a really great NPR piece. Is just done recently. I think it was in This American Life, if I'm not mistaken. And they did a really nice piece on the engineers that were working on ChatGPT, the initial one, and it's super interesting. Now, overall, though, that's just a little bit about that. Anything in the chat I need to know? Oh,
No, that's
okay.
shenanigans. You're fine.
Speaking of shenanigans, let's go ahead and pass it over to hallucinations.
Hallucination. So GPT and other AI do not get it right all the time. In fact, right now, we're in kind of a weird spot with GPT and anything that uses OpenAI's programming, because there's been a noticeable difference in the quality of responses, specifically with certain types of math. And then there's one other piece. So they're adjusting the code right now, and they're adjusting the network. And what it's done is it's lowered the quality of responses in a weird way. So you're getting more incorrect answers based on what you need. And the more specific you try to get with like math equations, as an example, the more difficult time the program's having. And instead of calling them errors, they call them hallucinations, because you're dealing with a neural network. So the hallucinations are simply just when the AI gets it wrong, because it's not really creating anything original. It's just remixing what's already out there. So the quality of the response you get with any kind of AI is going to be based on like the marketplace of ideas. So what's out there for it to draw upon. They call it scraping. So they send there's programs that go out, they scrape information from a source, they bring it back to you, and they say, well, here's what I found, or here's a mix of what I found based on what you're asking. So the better the prompt, the better the product. But the worse the prompt, the more hallucinations you're going to end up with, because it's having to do guesswork, like with any situation, if you don't give somebody enough information. So hallucinations are simply how errors in this system are referred to. So with prompt engineering, if you've paid any attention to the news and and the conversation about how to interact with these systems, eventually it gets to this concept of prompt engineering. And all prompt engineering means is the way you lay out the language to get an AI to do what you need it to do. And the prompt engineering, the better you get at it, the more applicable that becomes across multiple AIs. Because all these different programs, they're all very different. They have different approaches to how their AIs work. The programming is a little bit different. And because of that, the way you write a prompt is going to be significantly different from one program to another if you're kind of new at it and you're just kind of stabbing in the dark. What the prompt engineering is to make sure that you have essentially a recipe book that is applicable across AI. So that's why they have like these six-figure positions for people right now just for prompt engineering, like companies shelling out $300,000 for anyone who can write language good. Like that's essentially what it comes down to. And what these people are coming to the table with is a excellent way to put together essentially a paragraph that breaks down all the necessary components of what they want the AI to do that will work for a specific product. So it's really fascinating where this particular area is going, because prompt engineering is, by itself, it's a significant position. But what we're probably going to see eventually is this is going to get rolled into other positions, because if AI is sticking around, it's going to become necessary for most of us to become good prompt engineers, because we're going to be engaging with AIs on a more regular basis.
Yeah, and I like the idea that essentially if you're a good critical thinker and you know how to ask questions, you're probably going to do pretty good at this. And as teachers, I think that there's less of a learning curve because you have reluctant learners, and so when you ask, if you know how to ask the right questions, you get better responses. It's the same concept here, and so learning to really ask good questions will give you just better responses overall.
Yeah, and there's a lot of free resources if you're interested in trying to get a little bit better at prompt engineering specifically. If you click on that image, if you open up the slideshow, that will take you to that site. That's one of the better courses. It's free. There's tons of free stuff out there, and they're really short. It's like a 9-hour course that takes you through all the nuances of prompt engineering and how to like break down the language to get more of what you're looking for.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about how the system works first. It's pretty basic. Essentially, what happens is you have people who go through, and in order to create an AI program, they go through and they put a bunch of information inside of a database. And then they start asking like the AI system questions based on the information, or based on what they're trying to look for, and then they give it a yes or no. So yes, it's good, or no. And so as they go through, they're just teaching it how to come up with good answers. And so as they go through, they end up generating some kind of content. Now, this is different than a Google search, where Google search, what it does is it gives you resources that already exist. This is creating something brand new. And so if I'm like, oh, I don't know, draw me a picture of a unicorn, it's going to take information that it knows about unicorns and is kind of try to doctor something that it thinks you're talking about. And so it's thinking through the process and trying to figure it out. And so you can actually, like with a lot of these programs, you can actually give it feedback to help teach it and make it even smarter.
And the creepy thing about that, however, is it's going to be based on what's most popular or what people are looking for. So if you're using an artistic AI and you say unicorn, it's going to give you a unicorn based on what other people in the world think is a unicorn, because it doesn't actually know what a unicorn is. It just knows what the word unicorn is and what kind of imagery is associated with it based on what other people have done. Mm-hmm. So you get some really weird stuff.
Now, what we're probably interested in is on our end. And so on our end, what happens is all we do is we input a prompt. And so we ask it a question, and then it just gives us a response. And so somewhere in that middle, what's happening is there's the computer's putting together what it thinks we're asking for, and it's giving us something that it thinks we might like. And so in the same way, we can do that with images through programs like Midjourney, and we can even do that with computer coding. And so a few really basic prompts that you can start off with, like from a teacher perspective, things like writing an email. So you can be like, write an email to school staff that thanks them for 30 years of service, or review the attached article and summarize it in 6 sentences or less. So if you're working on your dissertation, explain the concept of blank in a simplified manner using at least 2 analogies. And you can even adjust reading levels of different readings. So if you have students at different levels, you can put in an article and ask it to rewrite that article so you can differentiate your instruction. And so we'll talk about that a lot more in a little bit. Now, some current perception, and this is completely outdated because as I think this was released in May, and things change very rapidly in this landscape. We found that out even when we're putting this program together, or this presentation. And so overall, what you need to take away here is that the younger guys, these are the people that are really our power users. And so young adults and teenagers, they're using it quite more frequently than older adults. And we're going and it's going to have like a much larger effect on our own jobs. We can think about some of the things that you've probably heard about with cheating and plagiarism, and that's definitely a big concern. But also jobs are, also requiring some of this work now too. And so I think in May was the first jobs report that came out where people actually lost jobs specifically due to AI. I think it was a 3,000 person job loss that year or that month. And so it is something to kind of think about. Now, some things that it can do, so I'm pretty basic. You can write and debug code. So if you wanted to create a video game, you can actually have it walk you through, even if you don't have any coding experience. You can create videos, you can create images, write and summarize text. You can actually have it create a presentation. I was working on a few things. Like let's say if you're a history teacher, you're like, oh, I need a PowerPoint presentation on the War of 1812. You can put it in and it'll actually put together a slide presentation and give you the images and do all the research. And so some of the stuff, you'll need to check out to make sure that everything is legit, but overall it can save you some time. Solving research problems. I talked to a woman who works at Stanford. She's an ornithologist. No, she's not. She works with fish, sorry. And what she said was that they're starting to use it to like for categorization purposes, and so inserting images and then trying to categorize things. And so they're kind of in their infancy stage with it. Yeah, and even creating business plans. I know that some people, if you're in the hustle culture, some people are picking up 3, 4, or 5 jobs and having AI do a bulk of that work. And so this is just a little bit with Midjourney. And so so Nick's kind of like an expert in this kind of stuff, and so he's definitely a power user. And so if you want to talk a little bit about Midjourney.
Sure. So Midjourney is a artistic generative AI. It's one of the big ones. So there's Dolly, and then there's another one that's I think through Google, and then Midjourney is also one of the major ones because it was on the scene before a lot of the other AIs. And all these artistic AIs, they do the same thing. They look online, they find sources that it thinks that it can use to create a new product, and then uses that to generate images. So all these images are just me playing with prompts and then coaxing it to do something that I want it to do. But again, it's based on what's most popular online, what people are looking up, what it can find, not just databases, but like DeviantArt, anything that's like on the Louvre, anything that's been digitized, there's some kind of image, it's going to take from that and try to build based on what you're requesting. The problem with this is, and we'll get to this in a bigger way in a moment, is the inherent bias in what is found online. So you may or may not have read about, you had an AI that was learning based off what it finds on the internet, and it was trying to learn everything. And what they ended up with was, after a week of it training itself online, it was racist, it was a bigot, and it had very specific political viewpoints. So they had to shut down the AI because of all the sources that it was looking at. So it's a big issue that they're trying to address with the programming and how they go about creating these tools. But like, even when I was creating these images, so 3 of these are for a side project I'm doing. But when I started creating this, I would only get Caucasian characters. Like, I'd ask for something and it would be all white characters. And I had to be very specific about the racial background of characters before it would give me what I wanted. the other issue I ran into is I'm making a character that's a child for a children's book. And as I try to develop that, suddenly the AI is trying to give me like, it starts out cutesy, but then the images start getting like sexy. And it goes sexier and sexier. And it's because it's drawing from what like fan art and all this stuff. And you have to force it to like backtrack to what you're trying to get because of how many people are trying to create various images. So it's a very complicated landscape right now. And the prompting is really what it comes down to. The prompting is incredibly important, and being mindful of what words you're using and trying to like sort all the garbage that's out there, like anything. It's a very weird sphere right now. Backtracking, it's simply it's kind of like a resorting what you've already used. So you can introduce new images, use that as a baseline, and then change the prompt so that it's more specific, and you put weights on certain things. Like, I don't want red in this picture, so no red, heavier weight on that, and it'll give me an image that uses less red but more of what I want. And that's the prompt engineering. And I use stuff like this for my classroom. So I use this tool to create images for students. I've had students use some of this for like some of their essays where we're looking at imagery. So this gets to be a lot of fun because they can just run wild with it.
Yeah, very cool. And one thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this earlier. The reason that we're talking about generative AI and not ChatGPT is because ChatGPT is it's a company, right? And GPT is a program within like this larger system. And so understand that when we're talking about generative AI, we're talking about anything that can generate things based on the prompts that we give it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so just forgot to mention that earlier.
Yeah, GPT is a product of the company OpenAI, and OpenAI is essentially owned by Microsoft.
Yeah, now right over here, here's some just different tools. And the crazy thing though is that I think I put this together in May, and then I adjusted it, and then I picked this one up in, I think it was like May or June, and I feel like all the resources here are almost outdated at this point, just because things move very quickly. Or not outdated, but there's like so many more, and some that are maybe a little bit more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so one image generator that I use is what was it, Night Cafe, and so it's like not even on here. And oh yeah, no, it is. Hey, I found it. Forget it. Just kidding.
It is there.
Yeah, it updated itself. It's fine. I'm just kidding. So yeah, so I wanted to go ahead and pull this up, and then Nick can talk a little bit about it. And these are some tools that Nick specifically curated for our group right over here. And so I'll zoom in a little bit, and then I'll add it into the chat as well.
Do you have the bit.ly?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait, maybe I don't.
So that's the bit.ly that should give you, let me know if it doesn't, but it should give you access to this document. So that's the share bit. So as you can imagine, thank you, Krista, there's a lot of stuff out there. And again, it can be very overwhelming, but these are just a few of the super popular, more widely applicable tools. And I tried to make it just a very short list so that you can pick like 2 or 3 that you think would work for you, for your respective content, or whatever your responsibilities are. The last 2 are a little bit less applicable for everyone, but they're still really cool tools. So I want to make sure to include those. And for anyone who's not a beginner, who's wanting to just know a little bit more about prompts and GPT, you'll be with Andrew towards the end of things. But for everybody else, I'm going to be going through each of these tools and talking a little bit about what's here, what they can do, that kind of thing. But you're more than welcome to explore these on your own. the first two are probably going to be the most cool for a lot of people just because of what they're capable of doing and what they have. My only small piece of advice is when you go to magic school, don't freak out because it's set to all when you look at it. So it's like the default is all, so you just get a wall of tools. There's a small set of categories at the top that will make it less intimidating. But there's some cool stuff in there. IEP stuff, lesson planning stuff, making questions, fun things. Like it's free and it's made by teachers. It's good stuff.
Nick, I was just thinking, so like going off script right now. Do we want to actually just show off Magic School really quick?
Yeah.
Here, I'll stop presenting, and then if you wanted to pull that up.
Sure. So the IEP stuff, Magic School is going to be, that's the one that's going to have a lot of what you're looking for. There's a lot of overlap with some of these tools out there, but Magic School definitely has the most stuff. So this is what you're greeted with when you log in. It's a free program. It's got GPT built into it, but their chatbot, so they use this chatbot's just called Reina, and it's an education specific chatbot. So she's not going to do all the stuff that GPT does. She's going to be specific to your educational needs. So everything from IEPs to counseling to whatever it is that you're responsible for, that's kind of the expertise with the site. So it's not a company, it's teachers, admin, and then some coders who put this thing together. And their goal is to make sure that there's a suite of tools for teachers so that they A, don't have to pay, and B, it has the widest application for an educational environment. So it has a lot of stuff for planning, but my favorites are the student support section. So you have a IEP suggestion generator. So if you have a student with an IEP, it can give you suggestions for their IEP, behavior intervention suggestions, also accommodation suggestions. So you plug in what your student has, you plug in what you need, and it will give you suggestions based on your content area. So those are probably the tools that I'd be using the most for the coming school year. On top of GPT, I had a student on the autism spectrum who very heavily utilized GPT because he was just overly verbose and he would get frustrated, cut off conversations with me. So these tools like saved him in my class. It was the first time he could really communicate clearly because the AI was helping adjust his language so he could tell me exactly what he's trying to tell me without getting frustrated and having to rush out the door, stem, and then come back. It was pretty cool. The communication, not as applicable, but it depends on how comfortable you are with AI tools. Productivity, you have a few different tools baked into this that are usually standalone. So translators, if you have to translate anything from Spanish to English, English to Spanish, you have proofreaders, rewriter, so it can level things.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
I wrote a song about Brenda using this, the colleague song generator, because it has to have some fun stuff in here to be a good tool. So I wrote a song to my friend. She did not appreciate that.
yeah, and I was going to mention, we'll talk a little bit about, because it says, can their current goals, accommodations, behavior plans be included in the support so their current IEP can be included in those suggestions. I'm going to talk a little bit about, not necessarily the district stance, but some things that we've been talking about at the district level with regards to student information and student safety.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about that right toward the end.
That's one of the reasons I like this tool, though, because it is FERPA compliant. It's one of the few tools that is actually designed so that it's not breaking any laws. GPT, if we've been using it in the classroom, And if students have been using it, there's some issues. But this is FERPA compliant, which is great.
All right. So
those two videos are just fun examples of people leveraging AI and what AI does if you just let it do its thing. So they were in the news quite a bit because it's all the voices, the writing, and the video was all AI generated, and it's super weird and creepy, but it's funny.
I think that's the best way to describe it too, like pepperoni hug spot. And then
Pepperoni hug spot's my favorite.
Yeah, so and then just like some things that you can do in the classroom. So some things that I did last year, writing unique articles. So for example, if you're like, oh man, I can't find an article exactly how I want it, or you're looking around for a particular thing, you can actually have it write an article for you. You can put parameters in. So being like, oh, I want an article about love and hate in Romeo and Juliet. I'd like it 1,500 words written at a 9th grade level. In that case, it can produce something, and yeah, pretty and they tend to be pretty usable. And then if you don't like some of the information, you can have it adjusted. Like I had things like, actually, can you add in some additional quotes from the text, specifically focusing on Act 3, Scene 1, or something like that, and you can have those things added in as well. And you can even make suggestions where those things go. You can do differentiating instruction based on reading level. And so you can take a base article and have it rewritten in 3 different ways. So you can have it written at like maybe elementary, like 4th or 5th grade level, have it done at the middle school level, and then another one at grade level. And so you can send that out through, what's it called? Through Google Classroom, and students, and you wouldn't even have to let students know that they're getting a differentiated piece. It can do the same thing with tools. Writing lesson plans. I did this last year with my student teacher, and so we were looking at, writing a 5-step lesson plan and what that looks like. And so inserting in information so that we can keep track and add in times, providing targeted feedback on writing. So you can upload your own essay. You can upload a rubric. And so you're like, okay, so here's the rubric that I'd like you to use. Please read the essay and score it based on the rubric. Please provide feedback. And so you can imagine if you're doing writing workshops in class, sometimes peer editing is of low quality, but having specifically doctored stuff that's particular for your essay, that's of as good quality as a teacher, is pretty solid. I did this with my AP students as we were ramping up for the AP test last year. Language learning chatbot. So if you're trying to learn a language, you can talk back and forth. I know Nick has been working a little bit with the translation pieces and communicating with people via that. You can automate grading. We won't talk about that. And then create targeted student interventions as well. And so there's a lot of different options here. And then from the administrative side, I think that if I'm looking at my own workflow, drafting emails, like especially ones that you don't want to send and they're like hanging over your head, being able to just put in the parameters and like being like, hey, can you write a professional email to this disgruntled parent that's blah blah, and then it'll write something up, and then it just gets it off your plate. And so many things that were hanging around, I was able to just finally get them off of my to-do list by doing this. Writing letters of recommendation. One thing that I've done is, and I'll let the students know ahead of time, like, hey, you gave me a 1-day notice on this. I am going to use AI to write this letter. And then what I do is I upload my I upload letters that I've done previously. I'm saying, I would like you to write a letter of recommendation done in this style. And then from there, I go and I put in the attributes of the student, and then it provides me a response, and then I can kind of edit it, and then within 5 minutes, I can have that completely done. Creating meeting outlines. I think I did most of my meetings last year with my staff meetings and things like that, using GPT, and then reading and summarizing reports. And so this is something that I know it's a bane of a lot of people's existence if you're working on the administrative side. But even if you're trying to brush up on a topic, being able to go through and become an expert once again, I think that's really nice rather than trying to like curate resources.
And if you want to mess with your admin, take your email, put it in GPT, and tell it to rewrite it in the style of Ernest Hemingway or Poe or a bard, and then send it.
That's pretty funny. Now, with all that said, and so we're talking about some of the advantages and some different things that we can do, and we'll have a chance to play around with these tools in just a minute. But what are some potential issues that you're kind of seeing on the horizon? So issues that we might encounter with generative AI. So, and yeah, you could just toss it in the chat, and we'll see what people come up with.
The initial thoughts, other than our jobs are doomed, because they are not.
Yep, that's a big one. I had a student last year try to throw in an essay. I looked at his history on the document. It took him 1 minute to write a 5-paragraph essay.
Yep.
And then I asked him if he used the program, and he's like, yes. And then he got all sad. Let's see. Yeah, forget how to think for ourselves. That's a big one, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, AI generate essays with inaccurate information.
So with the essays, you're going to get hallucinations depending on what kind of essay it is, how specific the prompt is, or how vague it is. It comes down to the prompt. It's always going to come down to the prompt and what you're asking, and how you're asking it. So if you have a student who, well, here, so the end of the year, we do an essay in my class, and it's a personal essay. They deliver it as a speech. They use rhetorical devices, and it's a time of personal growth for them, right? So I have the GPT talk with the kids, because their initial response to, hey, there's this tool out there that'll do the work for me. I don't have to do anything ever again, and my teachers are too dumb to catch it. So I have the talk with them and let them know that that's not the case. I will find out, and there will be fiery justice. But I went through the assignment with them. Let me just find the prompt. Oh, here it is. So this is an example of what I did in the classroom, like on the fly with them. Yeah, it will make up sources. So this was a personal narrative assignment. And the reason I saved this link is because it shows how I've adjusted the prompt based on what I get from GPT. And it really takes you really have to play with it. And you talk to it and let it know, hey, this is okay, but now change this. And now I want you to change this aspect. Now change this a little bit. Now take everything that I said previously, put it together, but now I want it to be 1,200 words or 1,500 words, and it will just do it, and it will make the adjustments for you. So everything that you do can be done on the fly until you have that finished product. It's not a one and done kind of thing. And that's why the tool's so powerful, because it's essentially a conversation. And I use it to like spitball character name ideas and plot things, and whatever I'm trying to. I use it as kind of like a writer's room, because it's very conversational, and it's how a lot of companies are approaching customer service now. They've gotten rid of people, and they just use AI voices and these neural networks. So it sounds like you're talking to a person, and you're really not, even though it can respond to you as though it's somebody who understands what you're asking.
Yeah, literally ran into that yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of this is really dealing with like kind of the cheating aspect, and honestly, there's not a lot of resources. Like I will say that some of the things, like people are like, oh, we'll put it into turnitin.com, or we'll put it into like a AI like scanner. They don't work. And it's just because of the nature of the way that these programs work, because everything is generated, new every time. You can ask the same prompt and it'll give you different responses, and different people can ask the same prompt and get different responses. And so it's, yeah, a lot of interesting things to come up with. Now, my background, I'm a philosophy major. I was, I study ethics. I teach ethics. And so there's a lot of things that keep me up at night with regards to these tools. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these ethical considerations. And so there's a few that you guys identified. So things like perpetuating bias. I think that's definitely an issue. And especially like lack of creative thinking, just because of the things that it's drawing off of and how it's being taught. You have a group of people, honestly, that are going through and trying to teach it bad things too. And so like I'm on a Reddit thread where, people talk like, they're always trying to jailbreak it or do all these things to make it like, I don't know, not a nice program just because they want to. Collection of large data, the question becomes, where does the data go? And so if you're asking students to sign up for these programs, what's happening to the information? And so who does that information now belong to? And so these are some things that are happening at the district office right now that we're talking about. Because like, let's say if I'm requiring students to use some of these programs, can I actually require them to do that? To give up their, their intellectual property to a program where they don't know what's going to happen with it. Information can be incorrect. We saw that a few times in the chat. Lack of creativity, plagiarism, authenticity, and then my favorite one is copyright infringement. And so there's a lawsuit out, probably a few lawsuits out at this point with regards to stealing of intellectual property without giving appropriate, not only like citation, but also this is affecting people's bottom line as well. And so if you're used to getting clicks and all of a sudden the clicks go down, now you're not making money. And so this is quite problematic. And this will continue to be an issue as they start figuring these things out. We have to understand that we're still in the Wild West with a lot of this. There's legislation coming down the pike in the United States. There's already legislation that was in the works, and I don't know if it's passed yet in the EU. But it's really just a matter of time. I think about it like the elevator. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the history of the elevator, but when the elevator was invented, people just wouldn't get in because there's like, nope, not getting that magic box. And then eventually though, so in order to kind of condition people to be comfortable with it, they put in like elevator technicians who would push the button for you. And then eventually those people went away and people got used to it. And I think it's the same thing with any type of like new technology. It looks scary, but eventually it's going to find its way into our work. And I think it's good to get in early and figure out how to use this appropriately. Now, this is a little bit different than other things, though, in the sense that there's a weird thing going on where this has been all released at once for free. And because of that, it takes down a lot of barriers. And so if you think about our students, a lot of our students, or all of our students have a device that's school issued. They have access to Wi-Fi on campus at the very least. And so a lot of these things, like let's say if I'm getting personalized tutoring is like, $60+ an hour. Now a student has 24-hour access to individualized tutoring. And so there's a lot of really interesting things that are really exciting about this, like, beyond the scary pieces as well. Anything in the chat that we want to talk about?
There's no specific questions so far. A lot people are kind of sharing their own experiences and their own thoughts, which is awesome. Thank you for everybody being so active, because yesterday it was a little quieter.
Yeah. Now, I did want to talk about just something that I proposed to the district, and I won't take credit for this because I actually stole this from AI. Just kidding. I stole this from a presenter that I saw in May, and he was talking about like, number one, the idea that banning won't work. And if we ban on campus, then what it does is it creates actually two groups of people who have access at home and people who don't. And it actually creates, it widens the gap that we're trying to close. And plus students know how to get around things and whatnot. And so we need to figure out ways to teach etiquette, and we need to figure out ways that we are going to show students how to, how and when these tools should be used. I think about Doug Fisher. He did a guest speaker spot when I was in grad school. And he talked how with the cell phone, it's the same thing. And he was talking about how people are extremely rude with cell phones, but it's because they don't understand the etiquette. They don't understand when and how to use it. And so part of our job has to become, teaching that etiquette, because no one else will. A lot of people don't have that skill set. And so setting up those expectations and making sure that students, are citing their sources just like anything else. And so one thing that he had presented was something like this. And so what it is, you have your title, your author, and your AI. So what AI was used for this program. And so it's teaching students that, okay, you might be using AI, but I want to know. And if I find out that you used it and you didn't cite it, that's plagiarism. And so in this case, what it would look like is you would put down the tool that you used. What was the exact prompt that you used? Why did you use it? I need you to attest that this is in fact your original work and not the work of AI. And then a small conclusion of what you learned from that process. Now, this is a long, lengthy process, but it should be. And I think that over here, this is kind of an example. I'll scroll down just a little bit. And so what he had shared with us is, he has, his name. He has he used GPT-4. Please edit the following paragraph to flow more easily. That was the prompt. He explained why he used it. He attested that this is in fact his original work, and here's what he learned from that process. And I think it's an interesting thing to at least start some conversations, because I know that there's a fear of students not doing their work and not learning at the end of the day. But if we look at really the job landscape, some places are requiring them to use it, and not having our students take advantage of some of these tools, may be more harmful than anything. And so there's a lot of things to take into consideration. It's a really exciting time, really scary time. But I think that at the end of the day, part of education is also being hopeful. And I think that, I don't know, I'm pretty excited about what all this is going to look like in a year. Because a lot of the stuff hasn't even been out for more than a year. So it's crazy.
There's a request in chat for your citation proposal for your tools.
Oh, I'll just.
Yeah, and so there's a side conversation about Turnitin. So the way Turnitin was looking for whether or not something was AI driven was based on the watermarks in whatever you submit. The watermark is the way certain words or letters are positioned in a piece of writing. So the AI would create whatever you want to create, but then it would create certain areas where it was obvious that it was AI created to deal with the issue of plagiarism. The problem is if you take your piece and then you resubmit it and then you resubmit it again, the watermark would go away. So if you process your paper like 2 or 3 times, which would take all of a minute, the watermark is no longer there, or it's smudged, and Turnitin can't identify it anymore. So Turnitin is trying to keep up with the tech, but the tech keeps changing, and people are very creative about how they're going to cheat or how they're going to make their work not look like it's AI, be it an email, a letter, whatever is being submitted. So there's the laws and the guardrails are not able to keep up with the tech at this time. And that's the rub with all of this.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like on the opposite end, where students are like at university and stuff like that are getting put on academic probation, even though they wrote the paper, but it's coming up as AI generated. And so if you put in a piece that's been published previously, it'll come up as AI generated. I think the Bible comes up as like 98% AI generated. Like you can put in, Genesis chapter, chapter 1. And I just find it interesting though, because like there's a lot more nuance. And at the end of the day, if you know your students though, you can tell pretty quickly, like as a teacher, that this is not their work. And so sometimes like the sniff test works out pretty well though. And one thing that was mentioned, because we've been in conversation with the district, is like as part of a best practice, if you suspect something, having a student come in as a one-on-one conversation and ask them questions like, oh, so tell me a little bit about this idea. Oh, why did you choose this quote? And when I did that with one of my students, he just gave up very quickly, and that was it. And on the other end though, I think it's a good learning moment, and knowing that at any point, you need to defend it in multiple ways. It's like, teaching multiple levels or types of intelligence, and it's a good opportunity, good teaching moment. And so I think more of those discussions are going to have to be had. And obviously the thing is time as well, trying to figure out what that looks like. And so, we're looking forward to some new best practices in the near future, because this isn't going away.
Yeah. And we should be getting some clear messaging from the district in terms of usage cases in the classroom. I think that was what the board meeting was supposed to be for, as they developed that language. So right now, as of right now, the general idea is, because most of the students are not old enough to use it, they shouldn't be using it in the classroom. And then it's also issues of FERPA, right? It's the student information. Anything that a student puts into the system, it's there, like it's going to live there. So kid puts in an address, a social security number, that gets stored somewhere, that gets used, and it could pop up somewhere else later. So anything you feed the system, it's going to try to learn from that and use it for certain case scenarios. So that's some of the concern right now with regards to OpenAI specifically, their tool. There's other tools that don't retain information. They use whatever's already out there.
Oops. Oh no.
What'd you do?
Oh, I was trying to open up the other meeting and get ahead of it, and then I just realized that it's going to start doing the feedback thing. So I jumped on it. Yeah. So, oh god, I almost died. Okay, that was cool. So
I don't want to do the rest of this myself.
Yeah, you're on your own. Sorry. Yeah. So I did want to show this last little piece, and this is just about kind of works cited and what does a future works cited look like, right? And so I kind of played around with that concept and idea. And so, yeah, you have your traditional works cited, but then you also have the different AI that was used. And we used more actually than this, but it gives you a kind of a list of things that we used throughout the presentation, and explaining kind of how we used it and why we used it. And so I think that's going to be important as we move forward, because if you have students create a slide presentation, for example, like students can put the information in and have it create a slide presentation for you. My daughter kind of got all sad because she created a slide presentation and it took her hours on Canva. She was just working like multiple days, her and her group. And then after she was done, I didn't tell her, but I told her, and then she got sad. But what I did was I took that same information, I just put in the topic, I put it into this program, and it created a 10-slide presentation with all the research and everything, and pretty accurately, just like a few adjustments here and there. And so it took me all of 2 minutes. And so that's kind of what it is. And so it's like, okay, so should students be able to do that? We're gonna have to figure all those things out. Now,
yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's anything to take away other than tools and some general information, it's that there's a lot going on, a lot changing, and our jobs are significantly shifted because a lot of this tech and these tools. It's huge.
All right. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take just like a 1 or 2 minute break as we get set up, and then I'll explain kind of our next